Hello there guys and welcome, it is Niran here, and today it is time for my best teams to manage on FIFA 15 career mode. Now I did a similar one to this last year, except it was the top 10. This time there's going to be around about 14 and I'm going to split them into 5 different groups. Now 4 of them are pretty self-explanatory, the 5th one I will explain to you, and I hope you enjoy the video and I hope you find some awesome teams to use on career mode, because that's sometimes something that people struggle on, is actually the team that they start with. So hopefully this will help you with that one, but I'm going to split them into 5 groups, the first being youth, pretty self-explanatory, awesome youth players, the second one being mid-table team, the third one being high budget team, the fourth being a return to glory, and the fifth being something that I like to call challenge. Now what challenge means is it's a team that's in or around about the European zones or in the Champions League possibly, but it would take quite a lot of effort to actually win a league, and they've also got some decent young players and such like. Some of the teams will actually merge into several different groups, and the first of those being actually Arsenal. Now a team that I'm sort of going to call challenge because it would be quite a challenge to win the league with Arsenal in their first season. They're somewhat of a high budget team as well, obviously 29.5 million with a very decent squad, but you've got to overcome Manchester United, or well, not so much anymore, but Manchester City, Chelsea, Liverpool certainly, to win that league in the first season and to become somewhat of a dominant force in the country. But also, of course, Arsenal got that famed youth academy of young players, and also some really good players for now, like Ramsey, Sanchez, Ozil and Oxlade-Chamberlain too. But now we're going to move on to the second team, being Hull City. Now this is what I call a mid-table team. Now any other season I wouldn't have gone for Hull, but some of the signings they made over the summer were absolutely stunning. People like Ince, Abel Hernandez, they've also got Jake Livermore, Tom Huddleston, as well as Hatem Ben Arfa now, Gaston Ramirez from Southampton, then some young players for the future like Robertson, Andrew Robertson, who signed from Dundee United, and Harry Maguire, who signed from Sheffield United, as well as some stalwarts like El Mohammadi and Alan McGregor, who's a pretty solid goalkeeper, as well as Nikica Jelavic too. So a team that you would initially think would finish mid-table, but you might be able to get in the Europa League for the second season and then have a long-term project with that team. Nevertheless, we're going to now move on to the third team. This is Borussia Dortmund. Now this is just a team that is just the standard team to use in a career mode at some point during a game. It is possibly the favourite, the perfect team to use in any career mode on any game. They've got great young players like Royce, Immobile, Mkhitaryan. Literally, just read any of those players. They're all good young players apart from Weidenfeller. It's absolutely amazing. All those players are amazing and also young, so you can have a really good project with them. And it's also somewhat of a challenge to beat Bayern Munich on the game too. Plus, they have quite a lot of money and youth players. It's just got absolutely everything. So that's certainly a team I would suggest using at some point during FIFA 15. Now I'm going to move on to Southampton. Another pretty obvious choice, actually. Not so much this year. Obviously losing people like Lallana, Lovren, Chambers and Shaw too. But they've replaced those guys with Dusan Tadic and Graziano Pelle, amongst others. They've also got Schneiderlin, Bertrand on loan, Nathaniel Klein, who's a favourite right-back for most, and Fraser Forster, of course, coming in, the goalkeeper from Celtic. And still a decent amount of money, £9.5 million. Somewhat of a challenge, really. I'm going to call them a challenge team, although they've got good youth as well, and also somewhat of a mid-table team, I suppose you could argue. But really, you'd probably be aiming for the Europa League in the first season, Champions League second season, and then see, it's another one of a project, a little bit like Hull City as well. So that's another team with good young players that certainly looks very good to use on this game. Next up is Lyon of France in Ligue 1. Now this is really quite a discreet option, and I'm going to put it under the challenge category just because when you look at the teams in the Ligue 1 now, you've got to overcome Marseille, but more importantly PSG and Monaco to win a league. And with players like these guys, I mean Enyema, Courtier, Kier, Basha as well, who got plenty of informs last season, was Marvin Martin and Nolan Roux, with Divock Origi of course on loan, and Solomon Kalou, plus £11 million. It's pretty possible to actually win a league. Probably not in the first season, a little bit of a project, but I would certainly say that if you were very good at career mode, you could probably win the season. You could probably win the League in the first season. So that's certainly a challenge, probably the most challenging challenge that I've actually gone through so far. But now we're moving on to 1899 Hoffenheim in the Bundesliga. Now this is more of a mid-table option, £7.5 million, which is pretty good. But when you look at some of the young players they've got, like Olivier Baumann in goal, Sebastian Rudy, Kevin Volland, Tarek El Yunusi, Roberto Firmino and Adam Shaloi up front, plus a 4-star team. Not too much, not too bad really. I think you'd be again looking at a Europa League finish in the first season as well. Suffered somewhat of a decline really, Hoffenheim, when you look at their team in comparison to where you think they should be finishing. Not really been too good for them, so that's certainly almost a return to glory as well in terms of looking at European places too. Nevertheless, we move on to another Bundesliga team now. This is Bayer Leverkusen. Now, this is certainly a challenge. You've got to overcome Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich to win the league in your first season and then become the dominant force later on in the career. £15.5 million, but look at some of the young players they've got. Bernd Leno, especially in goal. Karim Bellarabi, Heung-min Son, Hakan Calhanoglu. Do you pronounce it like that, Calhanoglu? I'm not entirely sure, but a lot of money as well to spend on even more young players there. Donati, Toprak as well, just to name a few more young players too. So yeah, certainly a team that I would actually probably use as well in career mode, just to challenge those guys in the Bundesliga. But now moving on to the first of the proper return to glory teams, AC Milan, such a huge force in European football, but where did they come? Only about 8th last season in the Serie A, so this is certainly a stonewall return to glory. Some good young players as well, like Mattia De Cilio, there with Andrea Poli, and of course Stefan El Shaarawy up front, as well as Jeremy Meneth. So a few solid older players too, like Diego Lopez, Alex and Pazzini too. But yeah, definitely a return to glory. £10 million to spend to try and get them even in the Champions League this season. They've had such a horrible season. It's really been absolutely atrocious for them. But now moving on to the next team. This is Borussia Mnchengladbach in the Bundesliga, returning back to Germany. And this, I suppose, is a challenge. I think Borussia Mönchengladbach are in Europe this year. Pretty sure they're in the Europa League. Probably isn't one that you could probably win in the first season, but certainly you'd be looking at Champions League and then maybe winning the league in the second season, or at least fighting for the championship. Some really good young players again. Jan Sommer, who of course came in from FC Basel, Andre Hahn, who would have come in from Augsburg, Havard Nordveit, Kramer, as well as Traore, and also Max Kruse up front with Raphael, who's just an awesome player, just absolutely awesome on the game and on Ultimate Team too. But now moving on to Atletico Madrid, of course, the winners of the La Liga, so you might be wondering why I put them in. I suppose these guys are somewhat of a high budget option, but also a bit of a challenge as well, because Real Madrid and Barcelona are so good in the game that even though Atletico Madrid won the league last season, it's still somewhat of a challenge to overcome those guys on the game. Amazing players. Obviously they brought in Antoine Griezmann and Mandzukic over the summer, as well as I think they brought in Moya too, but those guys, those stalwarts that have stayed, like Juanfran, Godin, Miranda, Gabi, Mario Suarez, Koke as well, and Arda Turan. It just doesn't get much better. Oliver Torres as well, quite a good young player on the bench. 4.5-star team and £29.5 million to spend on going after those big guns there, Barcelona and Real Madrid. But now moving on to the first proper youth reason, or youth team I suppose, and this is Ajax of course in the Eredivisie. You just look at that team and pretty much everyone is a youth product. Ignore Dali Blind, for some reason it hadn't updated that on the update, but Jasper Cillessen, Ricardo van Rijn, Joel Veltman, Nicholas Moisander, Nikolai Boylson, Davy Klaassen, it just doesn't end. El Ghazi, who I'd never heard of before this year, Kolbein Sigthorsson, even more guys on the bench like Rosario Zivkovic. Such a good youth system they've got over at Ajax there, as well as at PSV too. They won't be in this video unfortunately, but I think it was about £6.5 million as well to spend, so quite a lot of money too. Now though, moving on to Olympique Lyon. Now this, you might be wondering why I've put these guys in. This is actually a dual thing, somewhat of return to glory. I remember when I was growing up, I remember Lyon were dominant in France, utterly dominant. It's sort of gone downhill. I think they've had some sort of financial issues. 11 million in the kitty to spend, and it's also somewhat of a youth system as well that Lyon have got going on there. Clement Grenier, Maxime Gonalon, Jordan Ferry, Lacazette as well as Titi too. Those guys with ridiculous amounts of potential, as well as the goalkeeper. Is it Anthony Lopez? He's Portuguese, I can't remember what his first name is, but Lopez certainly in goal. Some really good youth players there, and somewhat of return to glory in trying to win back that Ligue 1 that they've not been able to win in such a long time. But now moving on to a 3.5-star team back in the Eredivisie. This is FC Twente, and this is another challenge team with £6 million. Trying to win the league in your first season might be somewhat of a difficult task. Obviously Feyenoord, Ajax and PSV to overcome. I suppose you could argue people like AZ Alkmaar as well as like Heerenveen maybe, but Steve McLaren went over and did it about 3 or 4 years ago. Some pretty good young players as well, like Bieland, Eberthelio, Ziyech as well. I don't know if I pronounced that right, Ziyech, I'm not entirely sure, as well as Castaños, and a few decent young signings recently too, like Kasper Kusk from the Danish league and Yunus Mokhtar from PEC Zwolle too. So yeah, pretty good young team as well to use, and certainly a challenge in winning that Eredivisie in the first season. But now moving on to the final team. This is Atletico Bilbao here, £9 million to spend, and this is simply a challenge again. Probably more of a long-term long-term project challenges to winning the league in the first season, but some good young players there like Aymeric Laporte, Iturraspe, Ike Munyain, and Aduriz, as well as Ibai Gomez too. Now, nevertheless, I hope you really enjoyed this video, this top tips video. I hope you found 14, in fact, really good teams to use in career mode, because I know that's sometimes a problem for people actually starting their career modes and knowing what team to use. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and comment about enjoying it if you enjoyed it that much, as well as any teams that you enjoy using too. I know people like Napoli as well are quite common choices too, but nevertheless, it's been a pleasure ranting at you guys today. Hope you have a brilliant day, enjoy yourselves, and goodbye.